Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Mark Devereaux returned home to find a full film crew inside his private warehouse, claiming the local HOA had leased it to them, he knew something was wrong. What began as a trespassing incident spiraled into a ruthless war over property power and one man's refusal to back down. My name's Mark Devereaux, 39, former logistics sergeant in the Army, now running a small auto service outfit just north of Reno, Nevada. I don't deal well with chaos, never have. I like structure, tools where they belong, timing that makes sense, and people who mind their business. That's why I bought this property, a modest house on 1 acre, and the real prize, a 3,000 square foot steel frame warehouse tucked behind it. Used to be for agricultural equipment. I spent the better part of a year turning it into a fully functional workshop with an office upstairs and a few bays I occasionally sublet to contractors I trust. It's my base of operations and my pride. More importantly, this property is mine. Bought outright. No mortgage, no HOA. The neighborhood across the road, Silver Branch Ridge, is HOA territory, sure, but their beautifully manicured tyranny ends at the asphalt. My deed is clean, my lot is private, and I made damn sure of it before signing anything. So when my phone rang at 11:42 that Tuesday morning, I expected nothing more than a quick check-in from a buddy. Instead, I got Ed's voice, low and uneasy. "Hey man, you got folks using your warehouse today?" I was under a Ram 1500 at a job site about 20 minutes away. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm looking at your place right now from the cafe across the street, and there's a bunch of people hauling what looks like production gear inside. Lights, tripods, crates, you name it. One of them told me they're here to shoot a music video." I damn near dropped my wrench. I told Ed I'd call him back, wiped my hands, and bolted. I ran 2 stop signs and probably shaved a year off my transmission getting home. As I pulled into my driveway, my stomach dropped. There were 5 cars parked in front of the warehouse. A white van, a couple of sedans, a black Jeep. The big roll-up door was wide open. Inside, I saw people moving around like they owned the place, unloading gear, shouting directions, laying cables. A boom mic was hanging from the rafters like a piñata. And near the back wall, someone was setting up a green screen. I parked crooked and marched across the gravel lot. A young guy with a clipboard turned as I approached, grinning like we were old pals. "Hey, you must be with the HOA rep," he said. "The what now?" Karen Bates. She let us in. Said you guys were finally making good use of this place." I blinked hard. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said. "This is my property. I own this land. There is no HOA involved, and no one had permission to be here. Who the hell signed off on this?" The guy's smile faltered. "Wait, what?" A woman in leggings and aviator sunglasses came trotting up, waving a manila folder. "We have a contract," she insisted, opening it like it was the Holy Bible. "Signed and everything, from Silver Branch Ridge HOA. Karen Bates is listed as the authorized representative. She showed us the site last week, gave us a tour, handed over the keys." "Which keys?" I snapped. She held up a red plastic tag. "My old master key, the one I stopped using months ago when I upgraded the locks." I snatched it from her and looked at the label, my handwriting. Karen must have gotten it before the upgrade, maybe during that neighborhood BBQ I hosted for PR a year ago. Damn me for trying to be friendly. "Everyone out," I said. "Right now." "Sir, we paid good money. And you can take it up with whoever stole it from you, but this building isn't for rent. It never was." "You've been conned." Tension rippled through the crew. Some looked confused, others annoyed. A man in cargo shorts quietly started unplugging a light kit. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and reported unauthorized access to private property. While I waited, I snapped photos of every license plate, every face I could. I wanted records, evidence. One guy tried to argue, but the woman who'd shown me the contract hushed him. "We're not staying if it's a legal issue," she said. "I'm not catching a case for a shoot." About 40 minutes later, just as the last of them were finishing packing up, a familiar powder blue Subaru pulled up. Karen Bates, in all her suburban glory, 50-something, perm as stiff as her posture, armed with a faux leather folder, and that damned HOA badge on her jacket like she was deputized by God. She stepped out like she was the hero of the movie, and I was some overreacting peasant. "Oh, Mark," she said, with that voice people reserve for dumb animals or stubborn toddlers. "This is just a misunderstanding." I turned slowly, jaw clenched. You trespassed. You gave people access to my property. You forged a lease. Her expression didn't even twitch. You weren't using the space, and it's right next to the HOA boundary. Everyone just assumed what? That you could steal it? She crossed her arms. I acted in the community's interest. That building has been sitting idle for months. We figured until it's properly incorporated, we might as well. Incorporated into what? She blinked, as if the question offended her. Into shared assets. You know, community infrastructure. I was so stunned. I laughed, loud, bitter. Lady, this ain't a picnic area. It's my place of business. You forged a damn contract with my address on it and pocketed rent for something you don't own. I didn't pocket anything, she said quickly. All proceeds were deposited into the HOA's community fund. It's transparent. My blood boiled. I heard sirens in the distance. Perfect, I said. Let's get the cops up to speed. You can explain it to them. Karen's eyes narrowed just a touch, but she didn't back down. Not then. The deputy took both our statements. Karen played it down. Confused boundary lines, shared perception of ownership, all the usual HOA doublespeak. The officer said politely that it looked like a civil matter. Since the renters had already left and no clear damage was done, he wouldn't make arrests on the spot, but I made damn sure he filed an incident report. I handed over the forged contract, the photos, the key. Karen looked a little paler when I mentioned the digital locks and security logs. Once everyone left, I stood there in the doorway of my warehouse, surveying what could have turned into a disaster. I felt invaded, violated. But more than that, I felt angry, because deep down, I knew people like Karen didn't stop at misunderstandings. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I barely slept that night. My mind kept spinning in the dark, replaying every frame of what happened. The nerve of that woman, marching onto my land like it was her personal annex of the HOA, drafting up phony paperwork, handing out keys like Halloween candy. And the worst part? She didn't even flinch when I confronted her, like I was the one out of line for guarding my own damn property. First thing in the morning, I drove down to the Washoe County Recorder's office. No detours, no breakfast. I needed cold, hard proof of what I already knew in my gut. 20 minutes later, I had it in hand. A full property report listing me, Mark Devereaux, as the sole legal owner of both the residential and commercial parcels. No liens, no HOA covenants, no shared easements. Crystal clear. I scanned it 3 times just to be sure. Then I marched straight to City Hall and requested a certified copy of the zoning map. My parcel was marked as private mixed use, commercial residential. No overlay boundaries with Silver Branch Ridge. The nearest HOA authority line ended 20 yards south of my driveway. The clerk even chuckled when I asked if a private citizen from that HOA could lease my property. If they did, he said, they're either a con artist or dangerously confused. I texted Ed a thank you and looped him in on what I was digging up. Then I scanned everything into a neat PDF folder labeled Evidence for Lawsuit, emailed it to myself, and drove home. That was when the second wave hit. The warehouse door had fresh scuff marks near the lock, like someone had tried to jiggle it open. My new keypad lock was intact, but the attempt was obvious. Someone had tried to get in, likely thinking I'd still be at work. I checked my cameras. At 6:12 a.m., a figure in a hoodie, tall, slim, moved like they knew the place. Tried the code pad 3 times, then left when it didn't give. No face, no car plate, but the message was clear. I went straight to Home Depot and bought reinforced deadbolts, anti-crowbar door brackets, and a second wireless security camera system. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was fortifying. While I was mounting a sensor on the upper office window, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Mr. Devereaux, this is Alan Crenshaw with Mountain Key Realty. We spoke briefly by email yesterday. Ah, the agency that rented out my building under fake credentials. I'd like to apologize personally, he continued, and explain. You've got 90 seconds, I said, climbing off the ladder. Crenshaw swore up and down that he was duped. Said Karen Bates approached him as a representative of Silver Branch Ridge's HOA Development Committee and claimed that the warehouse was part of an expansion area owned collectively but temporarily unused. She'd provided him with a scanned usage agreement with HOA letterhead, a fake title certificate naming Silver Branch Ridge Property Trust, and even a reference to a community asset map that supposedly included my building. She was persuasive, he said, and the documents were, well, they looked legitimate. Watermarks, signatures, the whole deal. She even brought another woman who claimed to be the HOA treasurer and verified everything. I let that sink in. You didn't bother checking the county records? We checked the HOA filings. They matched. We assumed, assuming just cost you your license, Alan. There was silence on the line. I didn't know, he said finally. And I'm willing to cooperate fully. I'll send you everything she gave me. That was the smartest thing he'd said so far. Within the hour, I had a digital package in my inbox, dozens of PDFs, some clearly forged, others more sophisticated. I forwarded everything to my lawyer friend Ben, even though we hadn't formally retained anyone yet. I had a feeling I'd need professional firepower soon. By evening, I finally got around to replacing the side door locks. Just as I was testing the new deadbolt, a sharp knock echoed from the front of the building. I walked around and found a clean-cut man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. City Code Enforcement. Name tag read R. Gonzalez. Evening, Mr. Devereaux. I'm following up on several complaints regarding possible unauthorized commercial activity on this property. You've got to be kidding me. He wasn't. According to Gonzalez, his office had received 7 formal complaints in the past 36 hours, alleging noise violations, improper storage of flammable materials, unlicensed mechanical work, and unauthorized use of a community facility. That last one made me bark out a laugh. Did any of those complaints include documentation? He shook his head. We're required to follow up regardless. Do you have business licenses on file? I did. I took him into the office, opened the safe, and laid out my full permits. Zoning approval, business license, fire inspection pass, insurance certs. Gonzalez flipped through them, nodded. You're in order, he said. But heads up, anonymous complaints can still trigger site visits. If this pattern continues, we may be required to issue a notice just for administrative compliance. Let me guess, I said. They all came from across the street. He didn't answer, but the look said enough. After he left, I stepped outside to breathe. The sun was setting, painting the mountains pink. My building stood solid, clean, and locked tight. But the air stank of siege. Then I saw it, spray paint. On the door, in bright red, community property, thief. And beneath it, in black, smaller letters, we take care of our own. I didn't bother wiping the paint off that night. I wanted the city inspector to see it in the morning. Let them know exactly what I was dealing with. Not a zoning misunderstanding. Not a paperwork snafu. A coordinated, hostile effort to bully me off my own damn land. The next day, I installed 2 more floodlights and upgraded the motion sensors. If they were going to keep sneaking around like feral raccoons, they'd at least have to do it in full HD. By noon, I'd already received another visit, this time from the fire marshal. He said there had been a complaint about improper storage of automotive chemicals and unsafe welding conditions. I showed him my sealed chemical cabinet, the permits on the wall, my clean OSHA checklist. He shrugged, took some photos, and apologized for the inconvenience. It's pretty obvious what's going on here, he said, lowering his voice. Happens more often than you'd think with these HOA types. I nodded, jaw tight. Let me guess. Complaints came from Silver Branch Ridge. He didn't confirm, but again, the silence was loud. By the end of the week, I'd received visits from code enforcement, zoning, and waste management. One guy actually showed up to check if I was running a junkyard because someone reported unsightly debris and hazardous scrap piles. What he found was a neatly organized stack of engine blocks and tool racks inside a spotless shop. The man looked almost disappointed. I started collecting their business cards in a shoebox. By Friday, there were 6. That's when the HOA tried to get cute. I was sitting in my office, eating a burrito in peace, when a knock came on the warehouse door. It was a well-dressed man, maybe early 50s, with an HOA pin on his collar and a folder in hand. Name tag said, Gregory Hastings, Property Use Advisor. I didn't invite him in. Mr. Devereaux, he began, smoothing his tie. I represent the Silver Branch Ridge Homeowners Association. We'd like to open a discussion about formalizing shared use of certain peripheral assets that, while technically adjacent, fall within the spirit of community cooperation. Stop, I said, before you break your own tongue trying to say, we want your land. He chuckled, the smarm practically dripping. All we're saying is that there may be a more harmonious path forward. Our records indicate that this structure was, at one point, earmarked as an auxiliary facility during early community planning phases. Your records are wrong. You're on the wrong side of the road, and you're damn sure on the wrong side of my patience." He flipped open the folder, pulled out a draft usage agreement. I skimmed it. Legalese soup about temporary designation, shared operational function, and a section titled Dispute Resolution and Access Rights. I stopped at the last clause. In exchange for formalized use, owner shall receive a goodwill stipend not to exceed $1,500 annually. I laughed in his face. Get off my property. Before I call the same deputy who filed the trespass report 2 days ago, he straightened his tie, but the smile faded. I urge you to consider this. Escalation benefits no one. Care and send you. We act collectively. Then get your collective ass off my driveway. That night, someone dumped a box of shredded paper and burned out light bulbs at the back entrance to the warehouse. No note, no signature, just a mess. I checked the cameras. The car didn't have plates. They weren't just escalating, they were testing me. So I called a lawyer. Her name was Emily Parks. Local, tough, smart. A specialist in property rights and HOA litigation. She used to prosecute for the city and got fed up with bureaucracy, so she opened her own firm. I met her the next morning. Brought all the documentation, my deed, the zoning maps, the photos of the crew, the fake lease, the complaints, even the red spray-painted insult. She listened quietly, flipping through the folder with a surgical kind of calm. "They're trying to manufacture a paper trail," she said finally. "If enough bureaucrats think your place is contested or problematic, they can bog you down in hearings and scare off your clients. It's not about winning in court. It's about making you miserable until you fold." "Problem is, I don't fold," I said. She smiled. "Good, because we're going to make this public." And painful. She drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon, addressed to Karen Bates, the HOA board, and Mountain Key Realty. It included demands for compensation for property damage, a full retraction of the false lease, and a halt to all coordinated complaints. We sent it by certified mail with delivery confirmation. The next day, a formal reply came back from the HOA attorney, some junior clown named Trevor with a stamped signature. He claimed Karen had acted within her delegated authority to temporarily allocate unused auxiliary assets to community use, and that my reactionary measures were interfering with neighborhood harmony. I printed it out and used it to mop up an oil spill under a Mustang. That weekend, I installed perimeter lighting and a sign at the driveway entrance. "Private property, not part of Silver Branch Ridge. Show. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Let them escalate." I wasn't going anywhere. The cease and desist letter stirred the hornet's nest. For about 48 hours, it seemed to work. No visits, no dumped trash, no bogus inspectors. But then came the retaliation. Monday morning, I opened my inbox to an anonymous tip with the subject line, "HOA board minutes. You're in them." I almost deleted it, thinking it was junk, but curiosity got the better of me. Attached was a scan of what looked like official meeting notes from Silver Branch Ridge's last board session 2 weeks prior. And there it was, 3/4 of the way down the page. Motion: authorize Karen Bates, chair of the Facilities Utilization Subcommittee, to coordinate temporary community use of the disputed warehouse property, pending future resolution of boundary claims and deed clarification. Motion passed, 4-1. I read it twice, then a third time. They were calling my warehouse disputed, as if there were any ambiguity at all. Emily confirmed the document looked authentic, which makes it even dumber, she added. "Now we've got proof the HOA board gave her implied authority to mess with your land." We amended the complaint. By Wednesday, we had a full civil suit filed in Washoe County Superior Court. Karen Bates named personally for fraud, trespass, and misrepresentation. Silver Branch Ridge HOA named as a co-defendant for negligent oversight and endorsement of illegal actions. Mountain Key Realty added for professional negligence and acting on forged authority. It wasn't just about the fake lease anymore. We included photos of the spray paint, the vandalism, the HOA documents, and even the surveillance still of the early morning break-in attempt. Emily sent a press release the next day. I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. Thursday morning, I was sipping coffee on the front porch when a white SUV rolled up with a local AM news logo on the door. Reporter hopped out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Devereaux, do you have a moment? We heard you filed suit against an HOA over property fraud." I gave a short, clean interview. Just the facts. Then I let them film the door with the remnants of the red spray paint. I didn't editorialize. I didn't rant. I didn't need to. The truth was uglier than any spin I could throw on it. The segment aired that evening, 10 minutes long, surprisingly thorough. They used phrases like rogue HOA interference, unauthorized subletting, and private citizen fights back. They even interviewed one of the film crew members who admitted they thought it was a legit lease. By Friday, my phone was blowing up. Clients, neighbors, even a city councilman called. Most were supportive. A few wanted details. One local farmer told me Karen tried something similar with his hay barn last year. Told me it was unused community storage and tried to swap the locks while I was out buying feed. So this wasn't a one-time power trip. This was a pattern. Emily dug deeper, and it got worse. Over the weekend, we interviewed 2 other property owners who'd had similar incidents. One guy, a snowbird who lived part-time in Arizona, came back to find short-term renters in his house. Karen told the agent it was a community transition home. Another couple, elderly, sweet as pie, found part of their garage cleared out and reorganized. Karen said it was requisition for HOA seasonal supplies. They'd let it slide to avoid drama. No one had ever taken it to court. Until now. We reached out to them and offered to consolidate testimony. At first, they were hesitant, afraid of being targeted. But when they saw the news coverage and realized they weren't alone, they agreed. Meanwhile, HOA damage control kicked into gear. Karen sent a community-wide letter claiming an unfortunate misunderstanding had escalated due to outside actors seeking to discredit community cohesion. She never mentioned my name, but every line dripped with veiled threats and passive-aggressive doublespeak. Then came the real kicker. Sunday morning, I found my mailbox hanging open. Inside was a printed letter, folded neatly, unsigned. We don't take kindly to traitors. You brought outsiders into our business. You made this public. Now don't be surprised if the community responds in kind. No envelope, no return address. I gave it to the sheriff. He added it to the case file and promised to increase patrols in the area, which sounded nice but didn't stop me from ordering a pair of floodlight cameras for the front yard. That night, someone smashed a window in the upstairs office. Didn't steal anything. Just broke the glass, left it open to the cold, and scattered glass across the desk where my laptop usually sat. It was personal now. The office window wasn't the end of it. By Monday morning, I was starting to feel like I was living in a damn war zone. The deputy who took the report looked tired and apologetic when I met him by the shattered glass. "You're not the only one having trouble with Silver Branch Ridge lately," he said under his breath, snapping photos for the report. "Let's just say your case isn't isolated." I offered him coffee. He didn't say no. Meanwhile, Emily filed a formal request for a restraining order against Karen Bates, specifically to prohibit her from approaching my property, contacting me, or speaking on behalf of my land to any third party. We also filed a subpoena for HOA board communications, which I suspected were going to be a goldmine of passive-aggressive conspiracy, and that's when HOA made a mistake. A big one. That afternoon, I got an email from a general contractor named Tyson Marone. He'd been hired to install solar panels on behalf of the HOA on a building listed as Community Storage Facility behind 321 Westfield Avenue. That was my address. They tried to schedule construction on my roof. I nearly choked on my coffee. I called him immediately. "Who signed the work order?" I asked. "Karen Bates," he said. Said she was acting on behalf of the HOA and that it was approved by the board. She even paid the deposit. I asked him to forward the contract. He did. The address matched my property exactly. There was even a digital mock-up showing solar panels affixed to my warehouse, along with a cheerful HOA logo on the title page. I forwarded it all to Emily. She called me 2 hours later, sounding livid. "This is attempted encroachment," she said. "They're literally trying to retrofit your property like it's theirs." I gave her the go-ahead to file an emergency injunction. By morning, we had a temporary court order blocking all unauthorized modifications or third-party contracts related to my property. It was signed by a judge within 12 hours. That same afternoon, Emily personally served it to the HOA office with a notary present. And just when I thought it couldn't get dumber, it did. The HOA attorney, Trevor the Jr., filed a counterclaim in civil court accusing me of interfering with planned community infrastructure development and malicious defamation for going to the press. I showed the paperwork to Emily. She stared at it for a long time, then shook her head, muttering something about legal suicide by paper cut. We filed a motion to dismiss the counterclaim. While the court processed it, I found myself facing new harassment, this time from inside the system. Code enforcement came back with an update inspection. One of the clerks admitted, off the record, that they'd received daily calls from Silver Branch Ridge since the TV segment aired. My mail started arriving late, sometimes opened. Amazon deliveries were delayed or misrouted. I began documenting everything, bought a binder, started printing time-stamped emails, photos, incident numbers. Emily told me to keep it all. "They're trying to exhaust you," she said. Death by inconvenience. And then, one night, at just after midnight, someone set off fireworks in my yard. Big ones. Not backyard sparklers. These were professional-grade mortars launched directly over the warehouse. One of them hit the side paneling, left a burn mark. Cameras caught two hooded figures running back toward the HOA gate across the street. Couldn't make out their faces, but they moved fast, like they'd done this before. That was the last straw. I took the footage to the sheriff's department. This time they called in a detective, a real one. He looked at the growing file, read through the complaint, and finally said, "This isn't harassment anymore. This is organized." I asked what that meant. He closed the folder. "It means we're opening a criminal case." I stared at him for a long second. Finally, once the detective took over, things shifted fast. He wasn't interested in HOA bylaws or shared community vision. He wanted facts, names, patterns. He assigned a case number, took copies of all the footage, and left my property with a duffel bag full of evidence and a look that said he'd seen worse, but not by much. The next day, he called me from the sheriff's office. "You're not going to believe what's coming," he said. He'd pulled Karen's name through the system. Turns out she'd been cited twice in the past year for minor trespassing complaints. Both dropped when the property owners declined to press charges. One was the hay barn farmer I'd spoken with earlier. The other was a guy from 3 counties over who accused her of moving garden equipment into a storage unit behind his house to make it useful. She'd called it a temporary reallocation for neighborhood benefit. The woman had a pattern, but now she'd crossed the line. The detective filed charges: trespass, falsification of records, criminal mischief, and, crucially, conspiracy to defraud. The fireworks incident elevated it, because even if Karen didn't light them herself, the escalating pattern of harassment pointed straight to her. There were too many coincidences. That same week, subpoenas landed at the offices of Silver Branch Ridge. The entire board was compelled to produce all emails, memos, and meeting minutes related to property utilization, my name, or anything involving my address. Emily, meanwhile, got a call from Mountain Key Realty. They were panicking. Apparently, their legal department had reviewed the lease Karen gave them again and discovered something alarming. The notary seal she used, fake. A deep scan of the PDF revealed inconsistencies. The notary number on the document was real, but assigned to a woman who had died 2 years ago. "Forged legal instruments," Emily said, tapping the table. "That's a felony." Mountain Key's attorney offered a deal. They'd surrender all internal communication with Karen, confirm under oath that they had been misled, and testify in court. In exchange, we'd drop them from the damages portion of the suit. We agreed. The next hearing came up fast. Karen didn't show. Her lawyer claimed a medical emergency. The judge didn't buy it and moved forward without her. That's when we laid out the foundation of our case in open court. Ownership records. The fake lease. Witness testimony from the film crew. The forged notary seal. The letter threatening retaliation. Surveillance footage. And now, criminal charges pending investigation. The judge, an older woman with no patience for theatrics, looked over the documents, sighed, and said, "This is the kind of abuse that gives HOAs a bad name." She approved the restraining order. Karen was now legally barred from coming within 100 yards of me, my home, or my business. The judge also instructed the HOA to cease all activities related to my property and threatened to hold them in contempt if any more administrative interference occurred. But the fallout didn't stop there. The local newspaper picked up the court story, ran a front-page piece with the headline, "HOA under fire for alleged property scheme. Local owner fights back." Emails poured in, calls. A few nut jobs offering to help secure the building with night patrols or drones. I declined, but one email stood out from a woman named Lisa Trammell, former treasurer of Silver Branch Ridge. She'd resigned 2 months ago, over ethical differences, as she put it. She was ready to talk. We met at a diner just outside town. She was nervous, kept looking over her shoulder, but when she started talking, it all poured out. Karen had been pushing expansion efforts for almost a year, claimed the HOA could justify reclaiming underutilized buffer zones adjacent to the community. Lisa objected, but Karen rallied the board behind her, mostly out of apathy and ignorance. No one fact-checked her. Lisa also handed me something else, a flash drive. "Meeting recordings," she said. I didn't trust her, so I kept backups. Some are just audio, some are video. But you'll hear what she said when no one was watching. Back home, I loaded the files. Karen during one meeting, laughing. "If he pushes back, we'll bury him in code complaints. The city's too slow to care." Another clip, quieter. "We've already had success with the old couple's garage. This is just bigger. Same strategy." It wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate. And now I had her voice saying it. The moment I heard Karen's voice on that recording, cold, deliberate, laughing about using city bureaucracy like a battering ram, I knew the tide had turned. This wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about accountability. Emily called the DA's office first thing Monday morning. She sent them the audio clips, the flash drive, and a sworn affidavit from Lisa Trammell confirming the context. By midweek, we got word. The district attorney was officially opening a criminal fraud investigation into Karen Bates and the Silver Branch Ridge HOA board. Lisa, to her credit, agreed to testify. She'd already quit the board, had nothing to lose, and a lot she wanted to get off her chest. She mentioned something else during our second meeting, a particular HOA meeting, closed door, off the books, held in Karen's home. She hadn't attended but heard about it from another board member, a guy named Victor, who'd started getting cold feet when things escalated. We tracked Victor down, middle-aged, meek, clearly rattled. But when Emily told him what Lisa had already provided and that perjury wasn't worth protecting a sinking ship, he agreed to talk, then lawyered up and flipped. That's when things exploded. Victor testified that Karen had personally altered meeting minutes and directed the HOA to file complaints under fake names. He even had copies of the original versions, ones that had been changed before being published. More digital evidence, more firepower. The DA issued search warrants for Karen's home and the HOA management office. That Friday, while I was in my shop adjusting brake lines on a 78 Firebird, I saw the unmarked sedans roll up across the street. Sheriff deputies, plainclothes agents, and a state investigator with a clipboard and a folder. Within minutes, they were pulling computers, boxes, even hard drives from the HOA office. Karen's house, less than a block away from the main gate, got the same treatment. And that's when they found the files. Actual physical files. Dozens of printed leases, usage agreements, and maps that Karen had been working on, each one with a fake HOA letterhead, false signatures, and forged notary stamps. Some had my property name on them. Others had addresses of nearby residents. Most had handwritten notes in the margins. Wait until owner leaves town. Use emergency access clause if blocked. Talk to Crenshaw or temporary occupancy excuse. It was a playbook. I watched the officers carry them out in boxes. I stood on my driveway, arms crossed, as one of the deputies nodded toward me and said, "We got what we needed." The local news returned that evening. This time, they didn't even knock. They just parked at the curb and started filming. I gave one quote, short and sharp. "I'm not the first person she tried this with, but I'll make damn sure I'm the last." By Monday, it was national news. Nevada HOA president indicted for fraud scheme involving private properties. The article went viral, citing criminal charges now filed against Karen Bates. 6 counts of fraud, 3 counts of falsification of public documents, 2 counts of a criminal conspiracy, 1 count of attempted theft by deception, and 1 charge of organized racketeering. The state froze her assets. The HOA board was suspended pending emergency elections. The entire community was placed under external administrative supervision. But even then, she didn't give up. That same week, Karen filed a motion through her attorney requesting the dismissal of all civil claims against her on grounds of executive immunity under community governance privilege. Emily laughed so hard she nearly dropped her coffee. We responded with a brutal point-by-point legal rebuttal, citing over a dozen precedents, including one from the Nevada Supreme Court, affirming that community office doesn't protect you from willful fraud, forgery, and malicious action outside the bounds of delegated authority. The judge didn't take long. Motion denied. And now, with the criminal case heating up and her reputation in ashes, Karen did what all cornered cowards do. She blamed everyone else, filed statements accusing Victor Lisa, even the HOA management company, of misleading her and altering documents without her full awareness. She claimed she was merely signing off on recommendations made by others. But it was too late. Lisa's recordings had her voice clearly and directly ordering these acts, and the files seized from her home had her handwriting, her fingerprints, and her sick little annotations. The court scheduled the first criminal hearing, and I was listed as primary witness number 1. Walking into the courthouse that morning, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, focused, like I had unfinished business and a duty to close it out. Not just for me, but for every poor soul who let Karen Bates into their life, thinking she was just some nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands. Now we knew better. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, HOA residents, a few familiar faces from the community. Even Victor showed up in a wrinkled suit, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by 2 attorneys. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the walls had finally started to close in. She wore a blazer that probably cost more than most people's rent, but it couldn't hide the twitch in her jaw or the way she kept folding and unfolding her hands. The prosecution laid it all out, piece by piece. The fraudulent lease to my warehouse, the forged notary seals, the forged HOA board resolutions, the spray-painted vandalism and the anonymous threats, the coordinated campaign of harassment using fake complaints and zoning weapons, and, of course, the smoking gun. Lisa Trammell's recordings, Karen's own voice detailing how she'd reallocate property under temporary community access. By the time they were done, the judge looked like she'd aged 5 years from sheer disbelief. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't embellish. I didn't grandstand. I told the court what happened, how I came home one day to find strangers in my building, how I was told my property had been requisitioned, how I was harassed, stalked, lied to, and gaslit by a woman who decided her community's growth was worth trampling the law. I looked Karen dead in the eye when I said it. She didn't look away. Then came Lisa's turn. Her voice cracked twice, but her words landed like bricks. She explained the inner workings of the HOA board, how Karen steamrolled procedures, manipulated meetings, and threatened dissenting voices with ostracism. Victor corroborated it. The contractor who almost installed solar panels on my roof testified too, confirming Karen had signed everything and paid up front. By the time the defense tried to spin it all as misunderstood leadership, no one was buying it. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Karen Bates was found guilty on all counts: 6 counts of fraud, 3 counts of falsifying public documents, 2 counts of criminal conspiracy, 1 count of attempted theft by deception, 1 count of racketeering, and an additional misdemeanor for criminal trespass. At sentencing, the judge didn't hold back. "You weaponized a position of trust to erode the very principles you claim to protect," she said. "You turned a community into a cover for theft." Karen was sentenced to 6 years in state prison, restitution of $120,000 to me, and a permanent injunction from ever holding any administrative or leadership position in any homeowners association or governing body in the state of Nevada. The court also ordered Silver Branch Ridge HOA to conduct a full financial audit, dissolve the current board, and pay for an independent trustee to manage operations during reorganization. Mountain Key Realty lost its license in Nevada within the month. It was over, but I wasn't done. I poured every cent of the restitution into rebuilding my warehouse. New windows, reinforced doors, full perimeter surveillance. I mounted the court verdict framed inside the office next to my business license, and I added one more thing. A sign by the gate, made from steel plate, laser etched in bold lettering. Private property, not part of any HO. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Mark Devereaux, owner. We don't negotiate with thieves, and just because I'd had enough of watching decent people get steamrolled, I did something else. I converted the old side room into a community legal literacy center. Free workshops, basic consultations, and one hell of a crash course on what to do when your neighbor thinks they own you. First class filled up in a day. Guess I'm not the only one who's done being polite.